I'll begin. Just so I can get up and make a cup of tea while I listen to you. I'll check in. The core group, the weavers in my bioregion, are going on retreat on Wednesday for Imbolc. And we're taking a journey together. And I have key points swimming around in my head. But mostly I just want the weavers to see themselves as weavers. So a retreat sounds just what the doctor ordered. And I'll pass it to Jan because you're our connecting bioregion.
Thank you. Yes, I've been feeling some movement finally in the kind of conversations that might lead to more conversations. I think that's the kind of the slow connecting work of bioregional weaving locally on the ground. And so have been making not just a functional but a relational connection with an Indigenous person here, and she's been doing some work regarding looking at the gathering other people to look at the history of the First Nations people here and the river valley, and using a book that I think I've mentioned before that had been written about this area with no sense of bioregionalism in terms of how the book was put out, but very very bioregional in its orientation. So I'm kind of just, yeah, kind of, she's quite willing for me to be engaged in the conversations with her, and also needing to kind of hold that space of stepping forward as being the Indigenous leader. So that's been good. And there's some conversations around watershed committee that's being set up that also looks like I might sort of get connected into. So it's, yeah, and also, yeah, there's been probably, I don't know if Claire and Pamela know about this, but there was a big announcement for this interior area. There was a big area that's been decided to be left wild, many, many acres of interior rainforest park. So with the pressures of logging, there's also been more recognition and more people standing up as stewards to go, we can't do this, we can't keep logging the old growth. So it was significant, and part of that has been fueled by the conference that happened in it was an international conference, but it did happen in Canada. A UN conference about biodiversity loss and the importance of setting aside 30% of the world or specific areas to keep them in wild. So it was a feeling of, oh, that's very interesting to have had that. And, you know, I mean, it's a drop in the bucket, et cetera, but, you know, it's being able to celebrate situations when they're there. And it's not that far from where I am. And so with the Indigenous people becoming more engaged here, it'll be interesting how that works. And it is along one tributary of the Columbia River, a very large valley. So that's been great to feel that one area at least has been hopefully in perpetuity, but who knows, has been saved for now. And I will pass it to Rita.
Thank you, Jan. I do have to leave at half after the hour because I have a book group meeting. Hello to everyone. And snowing lightly here today. Not much expected, but we do have snow on the ground and a good snowpack in the mountains. That's very hopeful. It seems like there's a trio of people, a triad, or what do you call it, who have come forward to plant more seeds about the potential of a bioregion here in the Roaring Fork Valley. So I'm very hopeful about that. Just watching quietly, and no announcements yet, but it is percolating. And certainly Miss Lisa, who's gone over the mountain, but we're still in touch, watching with hope and excitement for Joe and Penny's visit to my homeland, up to the Great Lakes region. And it's been lovely to make a good connection with Preston, because I know he's holding space for all that up there. And I guess that's me today, and I'll pass to Mitty.
Thanks, Rita. I'm so excited to hear of your news, Jan, because 30 by 30 has been a big drive in our local bioregion, and indeed throughout the state of California. And I'm in one of the lucky places where we're already 80% by now. But my excitement of the week has been to learn about a wonderful urban farm project, which is about half an hour from me, but heading right into Los Angeles. And it's a wonderful project. I learned about it through my local San Fernando Valley Climate Reality group. And my biggest excitement is that I think it's a place where I'm going to be able to meet somebody who is only about an hour or so away from me, who's been introduced to me this week by none other than JP through Generators. And she's a pro-social facilitator. And I'm kind of cooking up this plan, maybe to meet with her at the urban farm on a Saturday morning, if that works, where we can meet the volunteers there. And one of the things that most excites me about this urban farm project is to discover that they've been the center of a series of Los Angeles County Library projects, and have developed a wonderful set of videos which I think actually have relevance for anybody living in an urban setting. The guy who owns and runs Urban Farm with his wife is just the most engaging of people. And he talks about all kinds of things, from, you know, how to grow seeds in pots for your urban vegetables, to the importance of pollinator plants and all kinds of other really accessible subjects to people who are in an urban setting and wanting to become closer to nature and be a part of actually nurturing a more organic way of life in the city. So that's my check-in from my local bioregional. And I'm going to pass to Claire. How are you up north of me in British Columbia, Claire?
Hi, lovely to be here. I suppose I want to start with just the sense that, you know, my brother described this to me once. He said, sometimes I feel like I'm trying to swim in a muddy river. I'm trying to see through, and it's just, I cannot see anything. And eventually I start finding that there are little footholds, and I can start, and then there's a point where I can suddenly pop above and I can start seeing what's really going on. Right now, I feel like I'm looking through mud. And we've got the stone soup coming up in Cowichan, but there are a bunch of things as you get into kind of, and I'm going to say, trauma within different relationships. the baggage that people bring with them and the assumptions that they put onto it. And you start sort of realizing, gosh, I thought we were dealing with this, and I'm not really understanding where that's coming from. I would say one of the things that I have run into, that as a South African coming into Canada, I noticed how much guilt people had. They would feel really bad about things. They would sort of express that. They would kind of behave in a wanting to do the right thing because they felt so guilty. And to me, there's like a pullback that to me, it just drains my energy when it's coming from a place of guilt. And I don't know whether others have experienced that, but I keep feeling like I'm running into bits and pieces of that. So anyway, I'm feeling like I am just trying to hold on to the things that are real, that I can see that are real. And I'm grateful that Pam is coming up, and Megan Moser is coming up to the Stone Soup Gathering. Yeah, and just I think I feel, just from an embodied perspective, a sort of calmness when I can just kind of be present and observe what's going on, because that's where I start to see what I can actually hold on to. Because yeah, there've been a few things, not that they're terrible, it's just that they're kind of confusing. And like, what am I dealing with, and where are the pieces that I can hold on to? So I just kind of wanted to bring the real messiness of this right now, because it's felt amazing, and there are amazing things that are happening, and yet there are things that I'm like, I'm trying to figure out how to navigate. And rather than being big and bold and going into something, I tend to like to just observe until I know what I can hold on to. So I just wanted to bring that, because yeah, why not bring the messiness and the vulnerability of because that's how we've been learning. And to that end, I'm so excited about some of the conversations I've been having with Benji and with a number of other people about community art and the role that community art has to play in bioregional learning, and really how it also helps go to that place of paying attention, allowing what needs to arise, and the art is kind of what kind of holds that. So it's sort of holding the center of what collectively you're holding, and why that feels so important. And I wanted to just make that connection, because yeah, it feels really important to me. So I don't know if Pam is gone yet. Pam.
Thank you, Claire. It's going to be a gas seeing you tomorrow. And just a quick exchange with Megan, and it'll be terrific to see her too. So the Pacific Northwest is on fire with people rubbing together. Let's see. Yes, great news to hear about the land set aside, Jan. And it's an odd thing to hold that against all these other things that are going on, but that's good news, and we'll hang on to that one. And I was really interested in what you were saying, Gail, about your weavers. And I'm sort of doing a clarification of the experience of what it seems like you're creating the conditions through which it may be possible for people to see themselves as weavers. And it's kind of a gentling approach, which I really super appreciate, especially in the light of my having gone to a climate meeting in my local region last night, and suddenly finding myself to have army boots on and not being particularly gentle at all, and bringing in paradigm shift, and it's suddenly like the room is silent, like, what are you talking about? And realizing, yeah, that's where I was really surprised. I was really surprised that even using the word worldview was a bit stunning and totally understood in a direction that didn't go towards complexity or like all of those other it didn't go towards paradigm shift anyway. So there I was. I felt like I had my army boots on at that moment. Nobody else seemed to be too particularly ruffled, so I just let that one go by. But that was a good way for me, in fact, to find out where the common language was and with whom, the degree to which there was a reaction of great puzzlement. And a sense of also that it was inappropriate to raise that at the time. There was one woman that I have talked to about that essential sort of base from which to build an understanding of place. And there was kind of like, oh, well, we're not going to talk about that here. What else? Oh, just an aside that seems tangential, but I think is related. Jan has mentioned before about going into, having this extensive experience with improv and doing all manner of different kinds of work that informs who she is right now. And I've ended up as part of this recovery thing, recovery is an odd word, but enrolling in an improv class. And what an interesting experience that was, and what a little door opener. Like, it was so much deeper and more uncomfortable than I had anticipated. And I look forward to that as being a real possibility for accelerating my learning and understanding of things that go on within this space, and but not just the ideas, but my relationship to the ideas and also the people, deeper understanding of self, that notion of body, all manner of stuff, which is, I see you nodding your head, Preston, so I'm really interested in knowing what it is you're on a nod for. Anyway, quite enough. I shall pass to, have you gone, Preston? Sorry if I'm not, please. And I know Benji's not.
Pamela, thank you very much. It's such a fascinating bits and pieces that you brought to the conversation. Resonates a lot with me. 2.5 years of psychotherapy due to childhood traumas that I had no idea were the foundations of so many of the struggles I was going through the last few years. And when you begin to work through those pieces and discover how much the subconscious mind is playing games to protect itself from the hurts, from the vulnerabilities. And as Benji's mentioned many times, this whole aspect of this culture is so based on those traumas. So it's a long journey. This week has been in some ways very mixed. Still trying to wrap my head around it. Rosencrantz, my dog, had 2 seizures yesterday after 23 days of no seizures with the increased medication. So, of course, that was not pleasant, and my mind is still sort of coming. There's something about hope, and hope being eroded by reality that is, it's very hard to come to terms in those moments. And I think that's a lot of what's, even with where I'm at right now with Earth Regenerators and with this bioregional activation, but I'll get to that in a minute. First, the sort of the better news. After our call a couple of days ago with the Great Lakes Basin, I decided to launch into a little bit more about the Indigenous and tribal aspects and land back, which keeps on jumping up in my mind. A piece I had read over the summer came flooding back into my mind the next day. And the nice thing about that piece is I had already reached out to a few people that were listed in it. There was 16 people that were involved. It was here in Toronto. It's called Civic Indigenous. I'll put a link in a little bit to the article, but I reached out to probably about 10 people on that list, and I've had about 5 people come back very interested in seeing Joe's itinerary. So I'm hoping we can begin to weave them a little bit into sort of the deeper parts of the process here with Earth Regenerators. But I think that everybody's so busy here, trying to even get to that part of the conversation is kind of tricky. You know, we've started with there's an itinerary happening, and so they're excited about that. Let's give it a few days. If they, then we'll process it further. So that's beginning to happen. I should be sort of on top of the world about that, but I think it comes back to this anxiety thing. 30 years now of going to marches, of going to events, of even just voting at times. And, up to those moments, it's very exciting. This is going to be the pivot. This is where things are going to shift and change. And then the moment comes and passes, and then we all go back to our little corners. And I think that's sitting with me really heavily right now. I think there's a desire to want to be excited about the next couple of weeks, but also a great deal of reluctance, because once you give into that hope, then it hurts more. And that's a risk that's it's not easy to engage in. So that's sort of the darker side of where I am at right now. And that's sort of that muddy waters swimming, trying to find footing. Could really resonate with that with Claire, and I think everybody is in that place, and having the tools, I think, like the art, like the chance to engage with children in play activity, offers opportunities through that in a very different way than this process we find ourselves in of anxiety and confrontation and worry and unsure about the people reacting to what the reality is with hesitation and friction because they don't want to hear about it. So all of these things to me all swirl together in a really interesting boiling morass. Was I the last one? No, Benji, I guess you're still up here.
Yeah, I'm still up, and geez, tough follow, Preston. That was good. Yeah, wove a lot of things together. Muddy waters, sensing into the theme and add on to the value of improvisation. When the waters are muddy, when we can't see far out. Yeah, just cultivating awareness and dancing with the moment, so to speak, the best that we possibly can. That's a practice worth deepening. Yeah, as far as me, well, as far as the very local bioregion, I've had a pesky cough for about 5 days that just ramps up around 5 p.m. and I had like a coughing fit for like 3 hours or more. It's been boy, I haven't had one in a long time, so it's been nice to give the old immune system a little exercise. But I'm being reminded of how annoying they are. They're so annoying, just the constant tickle in your throat. But anyways, I'm almost through that. Coughing less and less, which is nice. I've gone like about a minute talking without doing so that's good. As far as there's no bioregional activity for me here in Phoenix. All my stuff's been online with all of you folks. I am thinking still about if I can find the time and if it makes sense to head down to Tucson just to see Brad Lancaster and all that he's done down there. He's done some really interesting permaculture projects, curb cutting, and I would just love to see it and to experience what desert permaculture is like when a master, if you will, has been tending to a place for decades. That's always a special experience. And the only other thing I have been embodying into place more and more, even though I haven't been embodying into community. There's a band of mountains that's just north of where I am. Even though I'm right in the middle of the city, these mountains, they pop up and they've resisted development and they're really beautiful. And there is just an unbelievable amount of hiking and nobody's in them. And I think because of the way that the perhaps it's the local ecology, the openness of the landscape, it's resulted in intersecting trails in just every direction. And so it's been fun to learn how to move across the landscape differently here. It's not quite like I'm hiking off trail entirely, but I'm definitely not like following a particular trail either. And it's a fun way to, I've noticed myself like interacting with the landscape on a large scale more than I do when I'm just following a trail. I'm because I don't know where the trail that I'm on is going. I'm trying to sense how to get back and like orienting myself constantly. And it's been really fun. I've really been enjoying that and getting to know the mesquite and the acacias and the saguaros and the desert willows. And it's been really fun. So, and I also have plans to go to the desert botanical gardens here as soon as the flowers start to bloom. So, yeah, no community organizing kind of stuff, but embodying into place nonetheless. Really been enjoying that. So thank you. And Alistair, is that how you pronounce your name? We have not yet met.
Unmute myself. That's how I pronounce my name. Yeah, hi.
Great.
I've just thought I'd drop in because I haven't managed to be in on any of these sessions and so on. I signed up here a few months ago. I'm in the UK, as you may have gathered from my accent, based in a wooded area in Sussex, south of London, and working with colleagues on a rural enterprise hub here with some 20 acres of land.
That's great. Well, in these check-ins, we basically just give a personal update or an update in terms of how the bioregional community organizing or learning is going for us. And you kind of intuitively just did that, but also wanted to just mention that in case you want to add on.
Sure. Well, I picked up, read Joe's book and then signed up here a few months ago and saw a couple of his chats online, which were very impressive. So that's how I'm here. And I've been working in ecological field in terms of land management design over the last few decades with colleagues. But I guess the reason for checking in generally here is well, alignment of the mission that Joe's articulated, which is great, and fitting in with what we can do here in the UK, which is a challenged country like many. You know, we're very unlike at the end of the Second World War, we're relatively self-sufficient in food, but now we import over half the food needed in this country, which is a ridiculous position to be in, but that's the way we are. And so we're connected here through local United Nations Association partnership with modeling generation restoration pocket parks. So that's under the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration. So we're framing the opportunity to engage with communities within that focus, because that's a good initiative that's come out of the UN, and then reaching out to one or two other farmers and landowners around here, and with the potential, I guess, of this space here, joining other farms, depending where we go, that could be a bioregional learning space in due course. And I should say, my journey into the realm of how we need to change our approach to living on this planet was through my journey through North America in 1979, at a time when I was busy reading books like Limits to Growth and actually seeing some really good stuff back then, the tail end of Jimmy Carter's premiership, And then obviously Ronald Reagan came in with Margaret Thatcher, and they informed us there were no limits to growth and it was all fine. But that experience of journeying through North America, I visited Arco Santi, and it's wherever form it was at. I'm just seeing good things happening, and so that's, I guess, where I've tried to work in a small way ever since, is trying to get stuff done rather than just talking about stuff.
Well, welcome to the space, Alistair. It's really nice to have you.
Thank
here.
you.
Yeah. So I think I'll just finish with a check-in, and then maybe we can go into agenda items. I'm in the bioregion. So once again, I'm not sure what my bioregion is. I'm in the Gulf of Dulce watershed, which is the southwest corner of Costa Rica, in a little area called the Peninsula de Osa. So the Osa Peninsula. And we have had a really busy week here on the Peninsula de Osa. On Monday, we had our third call of our council for the Regenerosa Collective. And so that's been really lovely meeting with these women. There actually has not yet been a meeting of all of us together. So every meeting, a couple of are missing where they can't make the call or they have something else going on. But it's just so lovely to see the coherence and the sameness in our envisioning and in what we see this project being. And so more and more as we speak with one another, we just see the weaving just naturally happening as far as what our vision is, which is, as somebody who's initiating, is like, oh my goodness, thank you, ladies, because otherwise, like, how do we get there, right? So that's definitely been a stroke of grace. And then on Tuesday, we got to go into the project incubator and give an update. Thank you so much, Mitty, for that hosting of that. It was really lovely, kind of coming up on a year almost of receiving the gift from the ER fund and being able to kind of just bring in where we've been over the last year, and just also some reflections, like personally, and like honoring and celebrating the work of this past year. And then on Wednesday, we had Manos Cambiadas, where we go out to local farmers. And that was actually a really interesting day because we were helping to complete a greenhouse that we had started a couple of months ago for one of our local farmers. And at one point, there were like 9 of us there, and then 3 of the local farmers who were basically like holding our hands and teaching us how to use this tool or how to, like how to make this garden bed. And I was like, oh my God, we're like this kindergarten class and these are our teachers. And at the end of this, we should really get a certificate because, like, wow, all this experiential learning that we're having. And it was really beautiful because we were making these garden beds out of like bamboo that we had scavenged from this place and wood that we had scavenged from another place, and just making it work. And then we went from there to another farm of one of our local collaborators, Doña Ada, who we had helped build a rancho a couple of weeks prior. And on that project, there's an institution that's come in that has basically gifted 4 greenhouses around the peninsula to 4 different families. And so one of the greenhouses was there, or the beginnings of it. And wow, guys, like, it's really interesting because, like, I don't want to be negative. And at the same time, it's like, what is this thing? It was like these big cement pilings and this big metal stuff. And they had this kind of cement entryway with this indentation so that people would put their feet in like soap before they enter the greenhouse so that not to contaminate. And they're planning on closing it all up. And it's like, how's that going to work in the tropics? And it was just so interesting to have in the same day this contrast of approaches, and actually very reassuring and very affirming of like, okay, just stay on the course. So Claire, I so resonate with that muddiness that you raise, and I feel like I'm swimming in the mud like every day. And then there's just moments like that when it's just kind of like, okay, I'm still in the mud, but I know I'm on some kind of course that feels, that senses is the correct way to go. So, and then also yesterday I had a call with Alpha, who we're talking about bringing him in here to the OSA maybe sometime in February to do some water work with us. So we'll see how that goes. I'll keep you updated. And yeah, that's my OSA update. So I didn't invite agenda items when we were doing our check-in, and I know we had talked last week about setting aside time for the art discussion, or this word that I've now come to learn, artivism, which I just love, right? I don't know if we had talked last week about how much of today's session we wanted to set aside, or if there's other urgent agenda items that want to be raised into the session. If somebody could recall from last week what the setup was or what we had said, Mindy?
Well, I hosted last week and I don't remember us actually making a specific time, but the thought occurs to me, since it's already halfway nearly through our time, why don't we start with the art workshop, artivism, and then maybe some agenda items will spawn out of that actual session, rather than spending too much time talking about what we're doing. How does that sound?
I think that sounds good, unless there's something pressing that someone is feeling, because that maybe is worth surfacing if there's something we really want to keep in mind.
The only thing that I wouldn't mind speaking to was the discouragement that Preston felt with the dashing of hope, and how it could be that just a very brief riff from people about their relationship to hope. And my personal 2 bits is that it's not a place I'd want to build my house on. I feel that hope is something that is tangential to the experience of actually, in some ways, hope isn't my business, that one moves forward in a direction that feels right given the circumstances. You know, fill in all the words. I'm not really wordy right now. But if you peg it on an outcome that is attached to this idea of hope, it's going to get dashed. Like, that happens. So some North Star other than hope seems to be required.
Thanks, Pam. Claire?
Maybe just a quick response, because I do think this could go into a whole session. So I just want to, and this might actually sound just too abstract and may not actually land for anyone, but I have to say that for myself, I've started to see things in a very different way fairly recently, that, but really when I start to think about us working together like a super organism, none of us are able to see the whole picture. We need to have the multi perspectives that we all bring. And in our society, the role of the people that help to connect the dots and synthesize the information, what do we call those people? There hasn't been a name for them. There hasn't been a valuing. And so we're trying to figure ourselves out. And when we get negative pushback, and I was so hearing you, Pamela, when you try to bring up worldviews and complexity and what have you, you're just trying to surface what we're dealing with. That happens in this space, and it's kind of, you see little bits and pieces of it, and it's helping us to recognize what it is we're trying to trying to, you know, if we're meant to be working as a superorganism, then we need to be able to see bits and pieces of it to see what it is we're trying to get towards. And so just saying how much I feel that we've made progress on that in this Earth Regenerator space. I am seeing more clearly. It's the thing in terms of, if I would say, I wouldn't use the word so much as hope, as there's a sense that I kind of understand what we're doing, and I recognize it in this place. And so, yeah, so I won't carry on about that. It's just to say, in the muddy waters, this is the place that God, thank God I've got this place to come to, that I've got you. And it's not any of you individually so much. I mean, yes, of course, but it's actually the collective. It's what starts to kind of happen. It's that we've created the conditions for this to even be visible. So yeah, I don't want, and I do believe this is like a much longer conversation. So maybe it is something we bring up at another point.
Jan?
Yes, I think that does name quite a bit of the struggle that we have. So I would say, let's make it an agenda item about, because I would say it's like, how do we move the conversation or facilitate a more meta view of what's happening in our projects, so that we're not always in the problem solving, fix it, shove something, move something, but being able to offer that. And so there is, you know, that's kind of a adult developmental community development process that maybe we could, I think we're all probably dealing with that and experiencing it, but maybe just having a conversation about that at one of our times would be good. And also one of the agenda items for down the road that I think could be kept, that I think it got mentioned last time or the time before or two, is, you know, once in a while they're really exciting and we want to hear more about that, or who want something more and would like some feedback. So how do we do more than just a check-in? Like once in a while that someone says, I need 10-15 minutes. And so being able to use this time for that. But I guess that again, it's like, how do we flag that? Is it we do that like, okay, next week I want that, or do we say this week I want that? But how do we get a little bit more time of focus if we want to deepen? But I also really want to use some time to hear about the community art and the artivism. So just some flagging for some other times.
So do we want to move into this artivism item then, and maybe put on the agenda for next week this other issue that's being raised of how we make time, or when things are surfaced, how we find a slot for those things to come up? Because I do believe that there is something that happens in this space that allows for emergence of things that then definitely want to receive more time. And is it this space that we want to give those things more time, or another space? But maybe even with speaking on this art issue right now will give us the sense of, is it in these spaces, or does actually this theme want more time in a different space? So if we could maybe go forward with this, and then maybe even just take a little bit of time at the end to look at that and ask that question. Yeah. Great.
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe handing it over then to you, Claire and Benji.
Yeah, thank you, Trisha. Claire, you know, this is sort of your wheelhouse. I wonder, I'm curious if you'd like to sort of kick it off, get the conversation going. I can riff off of you if there's any particular structure that you'd like me to lay out.
Yeah, thank you. And in a way, I'm sort of feeling a little bit messy in how I'm approaching this. So please, yeah. So from my perspective, I was saying, and maybe this is a good way to start this without going too much into it, but just to say, I feel that it's important to talk about art as being on a continuum, and that most of the time when we're using that, and language gets us into trouble. So let me just kind of define something, because I don't think we can even have this conversation unless we've defined the language. What I started to understand, what I realized was always confusing me, is that most of what we think of as art is at a far end of the continuum. It's art that is that we see in galleries, that is framed, that is on people's walls, is kind of separate from us. It's the professionalization of art. It's the commodification. You can buy and sell it. It's something that's an investment. It's something that we decorate our houses with, that kind of thing. And then there's school art and children's art that's kind of, yeah, that's cute and that's whatever. And, you know, it's like a craft and it keeps them busy, and, or you see their creativity. And then there's the, wow, there's the profound insight, the Van Goghs and the people who kind of give you insight into, and the, you know, the impressionists, they kind of reflecting the age that they're in. I'm going to say that we're in a very different place in terms of art creation than they were during the Renaissance and sort of that postmodern era, where there was a lot more freedom, and there were those artist cafes, and there was stuff that would actually be revealed through the art. I would say that we've actually entered a whole other place, pushing the art further onto the continuum. The thing I noticed was that, and then on the other, sorry, let me just go on that continuum. And then what I was seeing was, growing up in South Africa, you know, I did history of art, looking at art that is basically something that is held by the community, that has meaning in the community, and that actually can't really be extracted. And when you do extract it, you've actually lost any sense of understanding what the power of that art was. And I'm thinking masks that are worn for particular dances, that particular people can wear them to do the dance at particular times. And it's what gives it its power and its meaning is the community understanding the stories and the purpose, and then it's not about the cerebral piece. It's like there's an embodied knowing and participation, and in fact helping you as a community member understand your own place. So that I wasn't seeing in most Western art. In fact, very little reference to it. There was kind of an academic sort of analysis of that, but really very little understanding. And it was my own experience of being in South Africa at the turn of apartheid, where I saw the power of art actually start to help people were able to relate to the arts, mostly music, but it was all of the different arts, but where it was starting to hold a culture that wasn't able to be held in any of the conversations or breakdown of relationships, anything. So anyway, I just saw art on this continuum. And so the art that I was describing in the beginning, we see mostly at the periphery of society. So whenever you have budget cuts, it's like that's one of the first things that goes. And many artists, when you speak to them, would actually like to be doing more of the meaningful relationship-based art in some way, but they have to do what's going to basically bring in an income. So they compromise what they're doing, and it distorts everything that's being done. I know, having worked in the space, that there is very little support and funding for that more relational art. And many Indigenous societies, so the First Nations here, have basically named that art needs to be at the center because it helps to hold the meaning of what they're their values, who they are, and it's more the symbolism, and people recognize the symbol of why that's important. So anyway, I don't want to kind of carry on, but I just wanted to define that. And then sort of realizing, and because I've worked in community art as an artist in residence with communities for a long time. There were things that I was seeing, but I was saying this to Benji, it doesn't matter when I've gone looking for other literature on this. There are people who are working as artists in residence, as community artists, but a lot of it's written from a very academic perspective. And I keep feeling like there's stuff that's missing. I've had to kind of figure out a lot of what had made sense to me. And it's like it's not that I'm there are many people doing this, but I find it much more like where I find the real resonance is when I look at Indigenous societies and sort of see how they've used the arts that help hold all of the other relationships in a kind of balance. And so that's what I'm dying to have those conversations, because there are ways of engaging communities in using creative processes that help to reveal story of place and help unlock what we're as individuals don't even realize that we're carrying. But as we start to engage with those processes, it starts to reveal our own role in doing this work. So to me, it's it's powerful. I've actually researched around the world. I was hired by the provincial government like decades ago to do that research. So honestly, this is what I really pay attention to and have paid attention to for a long time. And I don't feel like I've been the best communicator, but at the same time, it's been really difficult to have that conversation. Like you were talking about, Pam, when you try to raise worldviews and it's kind of falling on deaf, like people just aren't able to hear what you're saying. It's really hard to have that conversation. And when I'm with people who can hear, it's like they get it right away. So I'm sort of feeling like this is a new context. This is the right place anyway to have that. And so just trying to develop ways of engaging people in those processes so that they kind of have an embodied sense of what that is. And then also giving examples of what this can look like, because it's not hard and people would get it right away, but it's just setting up the context. I think I've said enough. I'd love to have some response and see if what I'm saying makes sense.
If you don't mind, I'd like to just add a couple additional small things, because I don't want to flood what you just brought in. I'd love for people to respond to what Claire just said, because it's just so insightful and it just demonstrates your depth of experience and knowing in this and your unique perspective, I would say.
Benji,
yes.
Benji, your internet is really cutting out.
Okay.
I'm wondering if you switched your camera off, or is it me?
It's Jan doesn't seem Jan, was I skipping for you?
Claire,
Okay.
not
all right, I
skipping
think
for
it's
me.
just yours,
It's
Claire.
me. Okay.
Yeah, mine is unstable all the time, so believable, and it might actually end up happening. So it's been so clear to me for a year and a half now that Claire has some really important perspectives here to share, and of course others do too, but Claire's ours. I want to support her as much as I possibly can. The only thing that I want to add in here is that, and she mentioned this briefly, that community art really provides this enormous potential, many functions that help us in holding the center and in bioregional learning. So it's this particular frame that I think opens up the possibility for Claire's message, the one that we just heard, to really resonate, to land. I think it is that bioregional frame that provides so many of us coming from like modernity to intuit what she means when she's talking about like more indigenous forms of expression and the particular roles that art serves in connecting us to landscape, in connecting us to our place, in helping us to discover how our identity can come together relate to the land. We can have symbols that help us to understand how all that comes together and that we identify with. I feel like I'm rambling because I'm trying not to say too much and flood what Claire already brought in. So I wanted to just leave it at that. The intent, or I won't exactly, but the intent of this workshop is to share Claire's story, to clearly, and now you all are frozen. Oh, okay. To clearly make the case for how compelling community art is for all of this, nest it in the bioregional story, give real examples, and then try to find something approachable that people can participate in, can begin to practice, as Joe's been saying more and more lately. What can people do to begin exploring this themselves and with community members, while we also point at the North Star of what ultimately this could be, where the potential lies. So I just wanted to bring in the structure of the workshop in addition to what Claire said, and hopefully there wasn't too much in between to muddy the waters. Preston?
Yeah, two thoughts have come to mind. And I guess part of it, we've been discussing it a little bit for a while now, and Benji and I came into our conversation one day as well. So two things that specifically come to mind in this process of art. One is I'm reminded of young children that have dealt with traumas in life, and a good part of the psychology of watching them work through it is through art. That which we cannot express, don't have words for, or are struggling with, those confrontations that are part of our embodiment of a difficulty, are frequently able to do through drawing, through little plays with toys. So you see it a lot where there's been abuse and such with children. I think thinking of people as having these traumas and the resistances in these things is kind of key, and why art would be that way. The other thing that sort of comes to mind is Rorschach blots. We look at something that's somewhat ambiguous, and our mind is immediately drawn to the deeper recesses of what we see in it. And so frequently this aspect of bringing forth the subconscious mind about what we're struggling with, what again, it's hard to put words on. I think art offers a lot of opportunity in that framework. And finally, the one thing that actually drew me originally to some of the Extinction Rebellion events was their use of iconography and color, and there was a real visual impact that caught me, and I didn't expect that. I've never been specifically drawn to art or artwork or studied art, but I found that having that level of coordination and planning really had a very interesting community resonance within me that drew me to some of their work. I'll leave it there.
Thanks, Preston. RJ?
Yes, I just want to, this is kind of in a very general way. Festival Unbound, I just want to bring this up in the sense of what has been going on in Bethlehem ever since Bethlehem Steel closed and really changed the whole Lehigh Valley. And so that goes back some 20 years. And it started with a festival bound, which was basically a grieving and a celebration at the same time of the history of the steel in the Lehigh Valley. So very much industrial. But then some 30 years later came Festival Unbound, which has been going on for the last couple of years. And it's a whole community-wide festival that really involves all the arts and is very, very free form and who can participate. It's really a community participation. And it has virtually opportunity for anything that's the unbinding of the community, including participative theater, including art and music all over the place, but in a very, even though there's a schedule, in a very free form way in developing it. So I think I just put it up there. That's not really, what I put up is not really a good representation of it because you see a lot of sponsors and things like that. But essentially what goes on when Festival Unbound is going on is really community-wide and really does bring up the whole community feeling both present and past and future. So I really like that type of approach. A lot of it didn't really depend greatly on funding. It depended on the whole community coming together and finding different resources, and especially a lot of people who would participate in that. So I just want to add that as a way, taking your own community, your own landscape, whatever, figuring out a way to really celebrate change. And it's I've never really seen art as an artist. I do artwork, I guess I would say, but from early years, I've always seen it as something in the community. And I didn't even see art galleries until, went to New York City. That was the only place where art galleries existed. I didn't even know that until I was a teenager. So, so that's about all I could add at this point. The idea of the community festival, I really like seeing it happen.
Can I ask a quick question? And RJ, I'm wondering, do you know how those festivals happened? Were they, like, I'm thinking with Claire as a community artist activist, sort of initiating or providing structure for community festivals. Were there people in roles like that who activated those events? How were they activated?
Yes, great question. There was actually a history of a benefactor who left all her fortune to the arts in Bethlehem. And so there was kind of a base there. There's a place called the Banana Factory that a converted banana distribution or fruit distribution site into essentially a very broad arts center. And then there was also Touchstone Theater, which is a community theater that does community arts for many, many years. And when the Steel closed, there was such a fear that everything was just dying that I would say Touchstone, the Banana Factory, and a couple of other, well, Lehigh is there too, but a couple of other things really brought that together. We've got to do something. We've got to plan it together. So a whole year really went on into planning the first one. So it was that spark of a sudden trauma or sudden change that was seen by the whole community, and it was actually a collapse as a way of moving forward. But I would say it was the fact that Touchstone moved forward on that, and the Banana Factory itself moved forward on that, and then some of the others came together. So I would say there were definitely more than 100 participants planning that out over the course of the first year, probably close to 200, 400 people. And that's what made it free form, and that's what made it powerful. It took a spark, though.
Nice firsthand account from the Appalachian Edge. Thanks so much, RJ. Midi?
Gosh, so much bubbling in me as a result of this, and so much stirred by your introduction, Claire. What happened as I was listening to you, I was taken back to three things that happened in quick succession in 2020 for me. The first was that one of my sons in Australia spoke to me one day during our weekly conversation, really passionately about his sense that until and unless modern society can get into contact and dialogue around grief, we're going to continue on a degenerative path. And the following week, I read an article in The Guardian about the work of Robin Wall Kimmerer. And very soon after that, I heard Joe Brewer. And I thought, I've got to follow that guy because he is bringing into being something that can hold what my son and Robin Wall Kimmerer are standing for. And while I've been listening, I've actually found the original article I read about Robin. And she actually speaks the connection where she actually speaks specifically to the role of art, and she speaks about it in a way which really links for me what was bubbling up before you spoke, through what Pamela and Preston were speaking to, Claire. And she speaks specifically about the role of art. She says the role of art is to help us into grief, and through grief, for each other, for our values, for the living world. You know, I think about grief as a measure of our love, that grief compels us to do something, to love more. And I have the sense that this is one of the really important strands into the way of talking with people who can't yet face necessarily the the army boot. Actually hold these events. And you know, I lived in a community in Corsica where community art was just part of the fabric of how we live and work and play together. So the community art project, which was putting on the Passion Play at Easter, when everybody in the community came to be a part of the project of putting on that play, or whether it was the music festival that I've spoken to elsewhere, the Polyphonic Music Festival, where we hosted indigenous music from all around the world and our own in Corsica. But it was just so much part of the fabric. And I do think the festival piece is really, really valuable here in North America. We've got a couple of people in the community who I think, if we could manage to sponsor them, could do amazing stuff, whether it's in festivals or their own traveling performances. Max and Sarah have got this idea of coming to a watershed near you, of their music and dance project. And these are the things that I think in Earth Regenerators we can really put our energy and our passion and ultimately our funding, as the funding mechanism grows, behind, to find ways into these communities. They're frozen in grief, and this is what can begin the thaw, and this is what can hold people, I really believe. So thank you so much, Claire, for what you're holding for the whole community, and what I think we can get behind and around. Thank you.
Thanks, Minnie. Would anyone like to reflect specifically on what Minnie brought in? Or okay, I'll go ahead and go then. Yeah, I was actually thinking also, as you were sharing, Claire, and then Minnie, as you were just sharing, just about how just how we as a community can really kind of uplift this topic, and also kind of uplift those within this community who are working around this and really have this passion. So like Claire, I'm pretty sure that you were nominated within the Vivero project, and I know, or I don't know, but I sense that within Vivero we're just kind of bringing in people, like people as the people. And while I don't want to diminish the real need and desire to just support people for the work that they're already doing, I think there's also maybe something about like having people share like the specific areas that they're working in, so that it's like we would be, you know, Claire is there as Claire, who is a community art activist and is going to be taking the resources that she receives from Vivero to, you know, to model that within her community and to be able to kind of really see how that works in the community. So kind of elevating not exactly what it is, but what it is that people are going to be focusing on. And then it gives us as a Vivero donor community that opportunity to really say, we want to support the arts and we want to support Claire. And here those two are mixed together. So that was just a reflection I had. And Pamela, I think it's you, right?
Yeah, I like that lacing Vivero into the discussion, and how that is one of the ways that the community here is empowered to act in that regard. But I guess what I just wanted to bring forward is another aspect. I'm not quite sure it's how it interlaces, but one of the things, as anybody who lives in a rural-ish situation knows, there is a whole lot of unstructured community art that does go on, like within this context on the West Coast. I mean, you can't walk without stepping onto an artist. Like, I mean, people are just making stuff all over the place, and they're finding different venues for selling or not. There are tons of people. I mean, because as we know, life is inherently creative. This is what people do if they're not entirely consumed by the system that commands 100% of their attention on making money, making rent, make all of this stuff. So whenever a person is in a position to be able to have wriggle room to create, you'll invariably find an expression of that. What Claire, I think the distinction between what the community, the broader community that I'm describing, and what you're talking about is, and this is partly a question, is a sharpening of focus of that onto place and onto spirit. Because what is at the heart of this, when you're talking about this creative spark that is life, is spirit. I mean, that is how it is expressed. And then finding that way to, finding our way to those cultural metaphors which carry spirit into our lives and community. And by doing that, brings forward that knowledge of place. Okay, that's.
Yeah, thanks so much, Pam. Actually, you brought up a lot for what first of all, I just wanted to say, in a way, I know, and I'm just naming it, I can be my own worst enemy, because as soon as I hear myself being put into, Claire, like there's so many people who are carrying and doing amazing work. I think one of the things that I've seen is that there are things that are getting missed, and it's what you're speaking to is kind of holding that relationship and the complexity of the relationships and using the art in service of that I've noticed we don't have the support structures in place to help. Just that there's so much potential there, and it just keeps not being realized. And one of the examples that I gave when Benji and I were talking is that, whenever I went in and was asked to come and facilitate a community art process, and it didn't have the depth of relationships that have grown over a period of time, there was a kind of flatness that I could feel that actually, when you're pulling together different, like there's much more intentionality, and it does take a longer period of time for those relationships to develop. There is an aliveness that really sort of starts to come, and just being able to start naming some of that. And I'm just going to give you an example. Within Earth Regenerators, this is a community, there are relationships that have been forming for a while. And so to work with that, and when we start to bring in symbols and pieces that there's a common recognition that like it actually has some power, that's the kind of magic. And when something can hold that magic, that's where you start to see that something's starting to kind of work. it's using that depth of complexity, that's the thing that I'm really speaking to. So, I mean, we're already doing a ton of the work already, but it's bringing the art into that and allowing it to be in service of art. Also, in this context, art's not the thing. And as soon as art becomes the thing, it's kind of losing the power that it really has. It's like a placeholder. It allows us to see something that is to see the magic that's starting to kind of rise. So yeah, I just wanted to say that. There was one other thing that I wanted to bring in, and I just can't think of it right now, but yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Claire. Alistair?
I'll mute myself there. Just a practical observation in terms of connection. I don't know if Earth Regenerators has made, Joe or anybody else has made connection with the Design Science Studio, but it's got a institute-led initiative, which has been going for the last, in terms of the new decade on design, the new Design Science decade. And there is a cohort of magnificent artists and creatives there doing good work, all focused around the regenerative future. So could be some resonance there between what's going on here and there.
Thanks, Alistair. Anything else that we want to bring in?
Actually, I just want to mention a specific learning process within Vivero. Claire isn't nominated as far as I know, and neither are Max and Sarah. And one of the things that we've learned really early on with the Vivero process is that it's really best if people nominate themselves. And this is so countercultural, but we've learned it through our beloved Gail Cohn, who found herself nominated, but not in the way that she wanted. And it's such a business to unnominate somebody and then have them renominate themselves that it's one of the messages we need to get better at putting out with Vivero. And I'm actually going to do something about that today. Now I'm prompted, which is to really say to people, hey, it may feel countercultural. You may have been brought up to say nothing about your own great gifts and genius, but we need you to feel that you're ready to nominate yourself in Vivero. So this is an invitation specifically to Claire. What you have to do is you nominate yourself and you need 3 signatories. And please, Claire, may I be one of your signatories when you sign up?
Thanks for that clarification, Minnie. That's super important. And yes, it is countercultural, but it sounds like everything within Vivero is kind of coming up somewhat countercultural. So, Claire, did you have something?
No, just, yeah, big heart. Thank you.
Well, Claire, thanks so much for bringing this in. And so then is the idea that there will be a workshop that will be following to kind of to further bring this in and illuminate and activate this idea?
Yeah, I can maybe, Claire, do you want to take that one? You want to field that one, or do you want me to?
No, I'd love you to speak to it, but I did just want to acknowledge you, Benji, and just how grateful I am to, yeah, there's a part of me that is sort of feeling a little bit timid about just doing the communicating. So to have somebody as a partner to do that with feels really good. I've had a really hard time telling the story.
Well, we've been having a lot of fun and I've been learning a ton. So it is definitely mutual. And as far as the workshop itself, We have tentative plans to host a series, 2 or 3 sessions, probably 2. It'll be February 15th, which is a Wednesday, and then whatever that following Saturday is. Let's see, Wednesday, 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th. So February 19th as well. And the idea, the intention is to, like I kind of mentioned earlier, make a compelling case, show some examples of that really demonstrate and help people to embody the value of community art, and then provide the North Star of the potential of all of it, give people some approachable activities they can do. But we're really trying to focus on what people can do on the ground in their communities to begin taking those steps into embodying what this really means and the potential for bioregional learning. So it's going to be geared towards people on the ground and even bioregional groups on the ground. That said, I think anybody would find value in it, even if you don't have a bioregion. Is there anything else you'd like to add to that, Claire?
Yeah, just actually, I know what it was, something that I forgot when I was speaking before, but I just wanted to add this in anyway, is that conviviality, having fun, just that sort of very broad celebratory piece is also part of this. And it's what kind of creates the conditions for people who really are not interested in the deeper philosophical conversations, the places that are just making it impossible to go to, like talking about worldviews and all of that. There's a way of them entering in that they also start to get it at that level. So it's like a really broad thing because it has that celebratory conviviality to it. So I just wanted to bring that in. It's not just about the serious business of like doing this work. It's what helps to create the conditions, soften the ground, and people get it because they're getting it at a different level. You can't use rational thinking sometimes into this way of being. So yeah.
Can I really briefly just tie a couple things together? I think that's what you said is just so important. It's so important, and this loops back to the discussion or the connection between love and grief. Joanna Macy and Robin Wall Kilmer, is that her name? And we have to cultivate love for the earth, for life, for the experience of all of this. And if we're so serious, we're not going to love as deeply as we can. We're not going to grieve as deeply as we can. If we remember to be very playful and really love every moment of all of this, not just when we're eating or drinking. That's when most people celebrate, is when they're eating or drinking, right? But if we can celebrate, if we can have that depth of celebration when we're just creating art and enjoying art together, I think that is something that we can really use to cultivate deeper love for the world. So I think that the playfulness is huge, can't be understated, overstated. Over.
Thanks, Benji. Thanks for bringing that in and just being conscious of time. We have 1 minute left, so maybe we can just do a checkout with a word of, when we think about art, what's a word that comes to mind? And I'll just put the talking stick in the middle for anybody who wants to start.
Play.
Art.
Joy.
Interconnection.
Everyone.
Maybe joy as well. I was
Aliveness.
Expression.
Inspiration.
Beautiful. Thank you all for today. Great session.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Trisha.
Thanks,
Great
Trisha.
job.
Thanks, everybody.
Felt right at home.
Thank you.
See you,
See y'all.
Alistair. Thanks for joining us.